Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Imran, and I'm a senior analyst in the strategic consulting team at Cytel. My talk today is about the use of real-world evidence in healthcare and ways in which data science can help with this. I'd also like to thank Mithun for a very thorough discussion. I will not go into the details of algorithms, and I will instead focus on giving an overview of the scope of data science in real-world evidence. Hopefully, that will help you appreciate the larger picture. This is the broad outline of my talk. I'll talk about what is real-world evidence, then why has this captured our interest in the recent years, and then I will give an overview of some challenges in working with this kind of real-world data. These are also opportunities for the use of data science. And lastly, I will cite an example of how RWE is being used at Cytel. So it would be good to understand what real-world evidence is before we discuss other aspects. Yes. So as you see on the screen, this is how the FDA defines real-world evidence. They say it's the clinical evidence about the usage and potential benefits or risks of a medical product derived from real-world data. These medical products could be drugs or devices. And the word real world suggests that the scope is beyond controlled clinical trials. It pertains to evidence gleaned from everyday use of these products. Also, as the evidence is derived from real world data, the question is, what is real world data? So real world data is data of health status and how this changes with the delivery of healthcare services. Sorry. Some examples of this kind of data are electronic health records. These are electronic or digitized version of a patient's charts, notes made by the clinician after a checkup, lab test results, etc. This also includes data about medical insurance claims and cost of services. Another example of real-world data is from product and disease registries. These are large databases that contain information about specific diseases, the subjects who have these diseases, the symptoms, and the procedures that the subjects have undergone. So, for example, FDA has an adverse event database. World Health Organization has its own. Then there are smaller ones that are built by networks of hospitals or at the district level. I think someone also mentioned about the Sentinel project that FDA has undertaken. That is another example. And one other source is data generated from mobile devices and wearables. Wearables, of course, have become very popular now that most popular electronic brands have some form of a wearable device, mostly watches, that can track things like heart rate, blood pressure, sleep time, etc. These in themselves do not constitute evidence. Real-world evidence is obtained by processing and analyzing this kind of data. So now that we understand a little about what real-world data and real-world evidence is, the next question is that why is this of interest to us? To understand that well, we need to appreciate that we need to understand some challenges in modern healthcare. The first one is that clinical trials are becoming costlier. A common figure quoted is that it costs over $1 billion over the life cycle of development of a drug. That is a major investment. Also, medicine is becoming increasingly personalized, which means that drugs that can be most beneficial to a subgroup of patients are being developed. Now, while that is great from the point of view of efficiency of treatment, it also means that the cost of developing such drugs have to be recouped across fewer patients. This means that the cost of the drug would increase for each patient. That, in its turn, means that insurance payers have begun to demand better evidence for efficiency of drugs in order to cover these drugs. Also, health technology assessors are demanding better evidence of the efficiency for evaluating the broader aspects such as the social, ethical, and legal aspects of health technologies. So our RWE can help address these challenges, and that is why it is gaining interest in the recent years. Let's see some examples of potential uses of real-world evidence. I talked about patient and disease registries as sources of real-world data. These can help with faster patient recruitment and therefore speed up clinical trials. Also, these can be used to borrow historical information on the standard of care treatment that is used as a control arm in the trial. The advantage of that is it may be possible to recruit fewer subjects on the control arm, and therefore the sample size of the trial can be reduced. Very importantly, this is done without compromising on the statistical properties of the trial, and this therefore leads to reduction of costs. This is also particularly advantageous for trials of drugs for rare diseases, for which it is very difficult to find trial participants. So in that case, looking or searching through these registries is a good way of coming across potential subjects for the trial. Another way in which RWE can be useful is by expanding the label range of indications for drugs. So a recent example is hydroxychloroquine. This is an anti-malarial that is now being explored for the treatment of COVID-19. So it's traditionally used for treating malaria, and now people are looking if it can be used for treating COVID-19. So this expansion of the range of indications for the drug can also be done very well using this real-world evidence. Also, the borrowing of historical information that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago has also led to newer trials that make use of Bayesian statistics. These lead to inferences that are more easily understood by clinicians and the larger healthcare community, including payers. So maybe a decade ago, regulators were not very comfortable with these newer kind of trial designs, but now with more data and that data being used in innovative ways in trials, this kind of newer trial designs are also being accepted by regulators. The snapshot that I have over here shows the headline from a news article about Roche acquiring a company called Flatiron Health, which is a US-based company that develops oncology-specific electronic health record systems. The acquisition happened in 2018, and the cost was around $1.9 billion. That also indicates the promise it holds for Roche. So this is an indicator of the relevance of real-world evidence in today's pharma industry. Now, extracting real-world evidence from the data is also fraught with challenges. Of course, these are also opportunities for using data science. So let us look at some of these challenges. So one of these is data compatibility. I mentioned different sources of real-world data. Generating evidence from these requires that these sources of data are usefully integrated. So this, however, has been a challenge because data are stored in different formats with varying conventions that make this integration difficult. For example, lab results are stored in laboratory information systems. Medical images are stored in a different system, the standard being the PACS, which is a picture archiving and communication systems. Prescription data are in a third kind of system. And the problem is not so much that these are different systems, it is that the integration is difficult. So the solution to this is interoperable standards such as HL7. HL7 stands for Health Level 7, which is a standard for communication between healthcare systems. And this standard allows interoperability between patient admin systems, lab information systems, billing systems, and electronic health records. So you can see that it has brought under its purview at least some of these sources of data. and thereby allowing easy integration of these different kinds of data. And in this case, the storage aspects of data science can be useful in this regard. As other speakers have also spoken about these data science, there's an element of storage and how efficiently things are data is stored in these systems. So ideas from that can very well be used in improving data compatibility for real world data. The second challenge is data quality. As others have also mentioned, missing data is a common occurrence. This limits the size of patient cohorts that can be thoroughly analyzed and made use of as evidence. Then again, toxicity and comorbidity data is in the form of free text, that is notes from clinicians. Now, this being unstructured data has its own challenges. In this case, particularly natural language processing methods that use dictionaries that are specific to medicine can be used for converting the data to structured format. Now, one thing to realize is that almost all traditional sources of data that are now being put to use in real-world evidence have been collected with other specific purposes. So, for instance, claims data or billing data, when this data is collected, the objective is not to do real-world analysis. The objective was to help with insurance claims and the financial part of things. So obtaining real-world insights was not the purpose for all of these data sources. Now they are being extended for such use, and these challenges that we are seeing over here are only to be expected. A third problem is data privacy. I think someone also talked about that. Privacy of subjects has to be considered, and such analysis cannot inadvertently compromise that. We heard about GDPR regulations mandating this. As a consequence of this, subject data has to be anonymized before it can be used. So some of the primary level anonymization can usually be done manually or through the use of simple software. However, there are other subtle relations in the data that are not easily identified. These can be identified using, again, natural language processing methods and other graphical methods that effectively represent relationships between these information entities. These can be used for more effective anonymization, and thereby they can allow us to thoroughly protect privacy while using this kind of data. So these were some of the challenges with real-world data and how data science can help with converting that into real-world evidence. Now I would like to give you an example of how we are engaging with real-world evidence at Cytel. We have a real-world analysis group that is engaged in a number of projects that helping clients generate evidence for complementing clinical trials, to accelerate submissions, to expand indications, and also to support health economic decision making. So I will give you a brief of one such case study. This is an example about complementing a traditional clinical trial, and also it can be viewed as an example of personalized medicine. So in this case, we were asked to help the client identify a biomarker signature that would in turn identify patient cohorts that had the best chance of responding to a particular drug, the drug of interest to the client. And we were looking at genetic data of prospective subjects. And to do that, we used methods like clustering to identify clusters of interest. This was a fairly challenging task, given that genetic data is typically available on tens of thousands of genes, but comparatively fewer subjects. So as statisticians would know, this is a small n and a large p problem, and therefore many of the challenges that come with such problems had to be encountered. So we had to suitably process this data using inputs from subject matter experts, people who know about what kind of of the disease that is being studied and what kind of genes are typically associated with it. That kind of knowledge was used to narrow down the genetic data of interest, and then these findings were validated using some semi-supervised machine learning methods, and some signatures were identified. And these signatures were used by our client to easily identify the patient subgroups that could most benefit from the drug. So as you can see, the client was looking for patient subgroups that could benefit from the drug. So that is an indication that this was being used for as a way to personalize the drug to a smaller subset of people. So that is mostly what I wanted to talk about. And before I end, I want to give some key points. RWE can help improve the drug development process and thereby lower the cost of drugs. I think that is one of the most important objectives, to be able to lower the cost of drugs, because once that can be done, a lot of other advantages can follow. And extracting the evidence from the data is challenging, and data science can help with many aspects such as compatibility, quality, privacy. And RWE is here to stay, with most big pharma companies investing heavily in it now. The acquisition by Roche was one such example. There are many other examples. With that, I would want to end my presentation. These are some select references that you can see in details once the slides are published by Fuse. And before I stop, I would like to thank Pratibha Jalui, who is an associate director here at Cytel. She had come up with the idea for this talk and had drafted the abstract, but because of some other commitments, she could not present the talk today. Also, I would like to thank everyone listening today, and I'm now open for questions.